It's time to talk Indianapolis Colts football on the OFN today as we continue our look back at the NFL draft, our draft reactions for the teams, not just the ones that I'm going to be covering for the Our Lads Draft Review Guide, which will be out in a couple of months, but generally just the NFL. And when we talk Colts football, that means Jake Arthur is going to be with us. And Jake, of course, has been with us for several years. And he is and I know his job titles have kind of, they get thrown around there quite a bit. But I believe the last time I remember, Jake, you were the senior analyst for Horseshoe Huddle for Sports Illustrated.
Yes,
All right.
exactly. Yep.
Still got that going.
Yep.
Excellent. How's that job? How's it
On
going?
Fan Nation. Oh, it's really good. I love it. It's good to be back doing things how I like to do them and having freedom to just, do whatever. COVID protocols I've been
Oh,
dropped, so
yeah.
we're back in the facilities, meeting with players. We'll see how soon locker rooms get opened up, but it's been really good to be back.
Yeah. And we don't need to be diving back into COVID, that's for sure. I know people in Cleveland
for sure.
Feel differently, but leave it in Cleveland. Okay, let's get going because the Colts did not have a first-round draft pick, and yet even without a first-round draft pick, they were able to draft 8 players and also sign 20 rookies. And not just signing a bunch of guys, but, all right, for the sake of signing them, but a rookie free agent class that I think I've been most impressed with since I've been doing this for the last several years. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. We're going to start up with the picks first, of course. And the first one overall was Alec Pierce. How surprised were you? Because Pierce was maybe you could consider him a little bit of a reach, but the fact is, we did talk about how this was such a major need for the Colts to have somebody that can help them out vertically. And so Pierce fits the bill perfectly. He's got the vertical presence, and he also has the red zone presence. So those are two big, former hopefully issues that the Colts won't have to deal with anymore if Pierce can fill that role. So if you want to say a little bit of a reach, fine, but maybe they just felt Pierce just fit the role so perfectly that they just couldn't pass up the opportunity to have some other team take him.
Yeah, that's pretty much right. And they did actually trade back like 10, 11 slots and still wound up getting him. But I can't say we were necessarily surprised by them getting Pierce specifically. And anyone listening who has been following along with Horseshoe Huddle, there's really been 2 receivers specifically that we've been talking about that could fit the Colts in the second round. Just a perfect glove fit, and that was Christian Watson from North Dakota State and Alec Pierce from Cincinnati. Just 2 really big athletic guys. Their RAS scores, their relative athletic scores, both very nice. 9.5 or higher. Those guys really fit like a glove. So to get Pierce, it almost seemed too logical. It's kind of like when the Colts drafted Michael Pittman. It was a really poorly kept secret how well he fit with them. So it wasn't surprising. It was applaud worthy that they were able to trade back and still get him. So that was really good to see. But no, he fits them very well. They think he could play inside and outside. I think they see him opposite of Michael Pittman. Pittman is going to be the X, and Pierce will be on the other side, more the vertical threat. So that's what they foresee long term. I don't know if he's necessarily going to start right away. He may start as the third guy probably. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. They're really impressed with everything about him. Size, speed, hands, how he attacks the ball at in 50-50 contested.
Oh, he's awesome in those
areas.
Yes.
And they really like those kind of guys, and those kind of guys fit with Matt Ryan. I was a casual observer of Matt Ryan until the Colts traded for him, and I noticed even with guys who weren't necessarily real big, if they have the ability to win contested catches, Ryan will go to them. And so I'm not really surprised to see that the Colts continue to invest in those type of players, because those guys that can win those matchups, that's a big play,
Yep.
almost always. So it's really good. They love the kid's mental makeup. He's the type of guy that really wants to get better. And their new wide receivers coach, Reggie Wayne, that it seemed like he had Pierce circled as a guy he really wanted to work with. So this was all around kind of a slam dunk pick for them.
Okay, now before we go on, I am speaking of wide receivers. We have a question that we're going to pose to the viewers, and if you look here, you'll see the Arlad's 2022 draft guide. Now we're going to be giving away one, maybe two, couple of these to our viewers watching this show, this specific cult show, and all we ask of you is to respond to this question is, do you believe that the wide receiver core is now good enough for the Indianapolis Colts? So just comment section, let us know what you feel about the Colts wide receiver core, and you will get the opportunity to receive this draft guide, which is available of course now, and it's $32. That's the value. And even though the draft is behind us, remember, this is probably the best time to have this, because now you know where all the players are going to be, all the bios, pretty much, the scouting reports, they're in here. And that includes all of those rookie free agents we just talked about. There's a bunch in there. So a lot of Colt players in the guide. You can do your homework on that. And we only ask you to comment on the wide receiver position for the Colts, because I look at the wide receiver position still at this point, Jake, and it looks to me that they still need to maybe go out there and sign a veteran, because there's no way they're counting on Paris Campbell to stay healthy.
Right, and that's actually something I'm about to write and have something put out probably today or tomorrow. Is I think they still need one veteran, just one guy capable of moving the chains. They don't need anyone spectacular, just someone reliable. It's funny. I was looking at like Keelan Cole was an example, and I think he just signed yesterday or this morning or
Oh, did
something.
he
So,
really? Okay.
yeah, he's off the board, I believe. But no, they just need a mid to low level veteran who can catch the
Even like
ball.
a Danny Amendola, someone reliable.
Something
A little
along
bit
those lines,
younger,
yeah. Because
but yeah.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I want it to be a mid to low level guy, because I want to see these younger,
Sure.
high potential guys that they do have. I want to see them develop. So I don't want someone who's not going to be around long term eating into those developmental snaps. But you look at like Mike Strawn, Desmond Patman, Ashton Doolin, of course Pierce. You want to see those guys continue to develop because they have obvious talent. Desmond Patman is a big, fast vertical threat. He's starting to learn how to command the matchup at the contested
Okay.
point. He was a guy when they drafted. They thought he just maybe didn't know how to play to his size yet, but he's been learning. Mike Strawn, he was a small school guy, like Division II, Division III when they drafted him last year. He went to training camp and had highlight plays almost every day. It didn't really result in much of a role during the season. It was about 60 snaps or so, but there was no denying what we saw like every day in training camp. I actually had a conversation with him the other day, and it looks like he's going to be working on getting more involved. They were looking for more consistency from him. Special teams is a huge factor for them as well. He's really focusing on that.
Is he the one with the most
So that
upside
that
as
could
far as
benefit.
the prospects, the younger prospects?
Other than Pierce, yeah,
Sure.
Strawn
Yeah.
definitely has
Okay.
the most upside. He's like 6'4", 6'5", 220, 225. He basically was like the Division III Julio Jones. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, he's got to play like that in the NFL or sniff something
Yeah.
like that. But um, he dominated the lower level of competition like you would hope. And he had plenty of highlight plays last summer. Xavier Rhodes even said he thinks he's going to be a special player. So it's got to materialize, but he has a world of upside.
Speaking of lower level prospects, is this more than a 1 year deal? Because I looked at this and realized that 6 of the 8 drafted players did not come from Power 5 schools. Matter of fact, you had only out of the 6 of them, you had 3 from the group of 5, and then you had 3 that even went from the FCS, and I don't know specifically because you got Youngstown State, you have Yale, and then I know that you have FCS with Missouri State. So is that normal for this particular the scouting department and the way that they like to draft and develop players?
Yeah, absolutely. The Colts don't care what level you come from. They're looking for high end athletic traits and high football character. If they see athleticism and traits that they can work with, but that also make you special and kind of set you apart, they'll put the work in to try and develop you. Not everyone they draft is going to be a ready-made product. They want to get guys in the building that they can develop to meet their potential. So that's very, very common to see them take guys from schools you've never heard of.
Okay.
EJ Speed was from Tarleton State. I had never heard of that. Uh, Grover Stewart in 2017 was from Albany State. Mike Strawn, we just talked about, was from Charleston in West Virginia. They pick guys almost every year from a school you only ever see like in the NCAA basketball tournament. Like you just never see small names like that and anywhere else. But no, that's very common for the Colts to go digging for those guys.
Okay. Let's now move on to and we'll kind of stick with the offense here at the skill position because there were 2 tight ends that were drafted, and Jelani Woods was the first in the 3rd round, the 2nd pick overall for the team. What I also thought was interesting was that both Woods and the offensive lineman from Central Michigan both changed positions over their careers, and it was almost another kind of trend that I noticed on some of these guys that they either drafted or signed. Basically, really good athletes that change positions, raw, needs to develop, again, developing prospects. So if you look at Woods, I mean, here's a guy that really just was invisible at Oklahoma State, and he transfers to Virginia, becomes first team all ACC. You love the size at 6'7", 253. Once he starts to refine, and we know the tight end position isn't easy to learn in the NFL, but you get the feeling that he has a lot of the tools that you would be looking for from that type of prospect. That I even think that he has a little bit more of an upside than Mo Alley-Cox.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And he's pretty comparable to Mo Alley-Cox, but with a football background. Remember, Mo Alley-Cox was a
Yes.
basketball player famously in college and then kind of had to relearn football because he had only played in like junior high or early high school, something like that. But he had basically had to relearn football. But Jelani Woods is basically the type of player Mo Alley-Cox is, but who already knows how to play football. So really high upside there. We heard the story a couple times on draft weekend. He was a quarterback at Oklahoma State, and then they were gearing up for a Bedlam matchup against Oklahoma. And for the scout team, they had him acting as Mark Andrews.
Okay.
And then I guess he just dominated that practice, and the rest was history. He converted to tight end then. And then when he gets to Virginia, one of the coaches had reached out to the Colts front office and said, "Hey, why don't you come check this guy out?" And the Colts have had their eye on him ever since. I think it was last August. So they really, really like what they're getting there. They drafted someone who's pretty comparable to Jelani Woods and Mo Alley-Cox with Andrew
Oh,
Ogletree.
okay.
So, very similar story. Ogletree was formerly a wide receiver, but was just such a big dude that, with that athleticism, just move him to tight end, and it's a little better because he was really big and athletic, but wasn't necessarily a speedy
Yep.
receiver. But when you translate that to
That's
tight end,
different. Yep.
it becomes a mismatch issue. So Ogletree is kind of a similar story to Woods. All 3 players are comparable.
Interesting. Okay, now the rest was, well. Let's just go with the final player on offense the team drafted, and is it Rayman? How do you pronounce his name?
I believe it's Ryman.
Ryman. Okay, Ryman. So
Yeah.
Bernard Ryman from Central Michigan, and the deal with him again, we got somebody that played uh, what was it, tight end, I believe, switched to
Hmm.
offensive tackle, and you're looking at, again, a player that doesn't have a lot of experience, though. So another raw prospect, but he's an excellent athlete for the position. Whether or not he stays at tackle or moves inside the guard, I don't know. You can fill me in with what you've heard so far from the coaching staff. But a couple of years of refining his skill, and the team might have something there.
Yeah, it's kind of comparable to Danny Pinter a couple years ago out of Ball State. Came to Ball State as a tight end, switched positions once or twice, and just excelled immediately at both of them. Uh, Ryman is a very similar story. Tight end at Central Michigan. They move him to offensive tackle. I believe they said the Senior Bowl was only like his 19th start or 19th game on the offensive
Yeah, it sounds
line.
about right. Yes.
So yeah, so lots of upside. Very athletic kid. His arm, like his arm length, people have kind of made a big deal about it. 33-inch arm length is kind of what you're looking for in an ideal offensive tackle at minimum. His is like 32 and 7/8, so he's not got short arms. It's just like right there. That's been people's biggest gripe, it seems, with whether or not he could play tackle. But Braden Smith, who is their right tackle, is one of the better right tackles in the league, and he had guard arms too because he was a guard coming into
Yeah.
the NFL. But no, they love Ryman's attitude. He's a really sharp guy, picks things up quickly. They don't think he'll have any issue at all acclimating and staying put where he is. I think if I had to guess, I think the plan right now is he'll probably be the backup left tackle behind Matt Pryor. Right guard is their other spot that's kind of up in the air, but it looks like that'll probably be Danny Pinter with Will Fries backing him up. Um, Chris Ballard was asked after the draft, is Ryman your left tackle of the future? He stopped short of saying that and just basically said they'll get the best 5 linemen on the field, whatever that looks like. I don't know why it wouldn't be Ryman competing, at
Sure.
left tackle, probably being the backup initially. It makes sense for them to get a long-term answer there. But at the same time, if Matt Pryor answers the call and looks really good,
You move him
you gotta find
inside.
a spot for you gotta find a spot for
Yeah.
Ryman. Maybe that's right
There you
guard.
go.
So yeah, I think initially he'll probably be the backup left tackle, but I wouldn't discount him moving inside if that's what the line calls for.
And there were 2 other linemen they added in free agency afterwards. Could have been drafted. Josh Seltzner from Wisconsin, whose nickname, by the way, is Buffalo Head, and Alex
Oh, okay.
Millette, center from Marshall. Both of them had big years last year. Millette was a first-team Conference USA, played all over the interior of the line, and he was a player that was recruited at Marshall to play center. They moved him around at different positions, went back to center in his final year and excelled. Then you have Seltzner, who's only the third-team All-American this past year as a former walk-on. Only made 18 starts in the 44 games he played, but his best, he saved it for last. He did have like a drunk driving thing that happened last year, but he didn't even receive a suspension for that. I don't think that's the reason he didn't get drafted. And look, you get these Wisconsin linemen, and most of the time they're one-dimensional. They're these bulldozer run blocker types. But I think they're both intriguing signings, and maybe those are guys that worst case scenario will be on the practice squad, and maybe next year will be on the active roster.
Yeah, you could see that because the Colts are perfectly fine with stashing rookies on the practice squad and then seeing, midway through the year or into year 2 after you sign them to a futures deal, what they've got and if they can compete, to be in the main rotation. Uh, Honestly, on the offensive line, the interior is what I consider to be the spot of, if they have a need on the line, it's definitely on the interior. I think they're probably one experienced player inside short because they lost both right guards from last year and Chris Reed and Mark
Yeah,
Glowinski.
we talked about
So
that. You thought they would at least sign one of those guys.
yeah, it made sense. And if they want to start Danny Pinter or Will Fries, that's perfectly fine. I just think they're missing a little depth. because some of their backup tackles would also be the guys relied upon to be backup interior guys, and you're just getting a little short
Yes,
there.
one
You
injury,
know,
and yeah, you have a concern.
yeah, because behind Ryan Kelly, who has had injuries throughout his career, would normally be Danny Pinter, but if Pinter is now starting at right guard, you know, I just think they're one maybe two capable guys short. So those undrafted guys, Seltzner and the kid from Marshall, they're wise picks. That's, you know, like you said, Seltzer's not super experienced, but capable. You know, those Wisconsin guys, I don't know what it is. They're just bred different. They're ready to go right away, it seems. So they could be in much worse position if they had to rely on one of those
Do you
guys.
think that they might sign a veteran in a guard, or a versatile?
Uh,
Is there someone available that's a versatile veteran offensive lineman?
the guys who are available right now, it's not like a tremendous group. I kind of feel like they could wait until preseason cuts,
Okay,
grab
that
a
makes
guy from
sense.
another roster that they like, because there's a lot of sorting out that needs to be done with their offensive line. Who's going to provide depth where? Because they do have some guys that you kind of know are going to make the roster, and then they have some guys with potential who are a little more raw.
Sure.
So I think there's some sorting out that needs to be done, and then they could probably bring in another
Yeah,
guy
they have
to
to.
provide
They
some
got to
depth.
bring someone in. They
Yeah,
have to. I mean, there's just right now
yeah,
there's just too much inexperience if somebody gets hurt. So
yeah. They brought in Dennis Kelly this week, which is a terrific move. I thought they should have made it last year, honestly. But Dennis Kelly, that's a great move. But if you're looking at things on paper right now, he's probably your backup right tackle, where Ryman is the backup left tackle. Kelly can play all over the line. Just I don't think he has experience at center, but he's played all four other positions.
and by the
Um,
way,
so
speaking of
yeah,
Mollett at center, this happens all the time in the NFL, especially at the center position. I was talking with Cole Thompson about the Texans in the same situation with him.
uh-huh.
I mean, how often do you see if I had to pick one position in the NFL where you can get a guy in the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, or sign him as a rookie free agent and he becomes a standout starter in the NFL, I would probably pick center.
Probably, and it's a very specific position too, because at least with the Colts, I can just think of a million times where they've had someone who can play four of the five positions, but center is the one they haven't played before.
Yeah,
You know, it's a specific
sure.
position, and you got to have a really smart guy like Ryan Kelly has a ton of responsibility week to
Yep.
week with the protection plan, and Danny Pinter, I'm sure has been quite a bit involved as well as the backup, and now if he's going to be starting right guard, but no, it's there's you got to have a certain kind of guy, but physically, it seems like you can get those
Yeah.
guys on day 3.
Because
Yeah.
when you're talking about skill positions, I mean, those are the guys, the blazing speed, and those guys are
Yeah.
gonna get drafted. Maybe running back is another one that you can find these
Mhm.
guys. And speaking of running back, why do you think they signed 3 draftable running backs? Because these are all guys, if you're a college football fan, like a diehard, you know all of them, including CJ Verdell, who broke out early in his career, had a great start. He's got a lot of experience, but he's missed a lot of time with injury, and he's kind of a smallest kind of guy. So I understand why he wasn't drafted. Borgie also had a tremendous early career with the freshman season, 85 receptions under Mike Leach's offense, which is just incredible. So you can do that. But Kenny Block, that's something to keep an eye on. And then Devontae Price, he was kind of hot early on in the draft process because of his size and speed ratio. But the more it went on, people realized he's a little limited as far as his overall skill level, and maybe he doesn't break enough tackles for a big guy, and maybe he doesn't have enough wiggle for a speed guy. But still, you got 3 of those guys that they all signed that all had pretty good college careers. So was there a reason for that? It's Taylor, it's Hines, and is that what they were thinking? Is they need to find someone that could maybe be a reliable number 3?
Well, they do have Deion Jackson, who I think they like as the third guy, and he's become a special teams guy as
Okay.
well. He basically forced Marlon Mack off the ship
Okay.
last year. Marlon Mack, who's a former 1,000-yard rusher, you know, by mid-season, Mack was an inactive every week because Deion Jackson was there playing special
Okay.
teams and was their third guy.
And by the way, a rookie, free agent, undrafted. So.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. No, so they need more depth. I mean, Deion Jackson isn't so good that he doesn't need competition, so that's part of it. But they only have 3 running backs on the
Yeah,
roster
that's true.
outside of those undrafted guys. So Jonathan Taylor isn't going to touch the ball in the preseason. So you need guys to take those snaps. Nyheim Hines might not either because I think Hines is due for a huge role. Hines is probably going to be looking like 2020 Hines with Philip Rivers this year because Matt Ryan actually throws the ball to running backs. So if you're looking for roles as backups, Verdell and Borgie kind of make sense as a Nyheim Hines backup type, whereas Price could probably be more of a between the tackles type. You need those type of backups behind Taylor and Jackson. So it's a little bit of role depth, but also they need guys to get them through the summer because they're not going to ding up Taylor and Hines.
Yeah, and don't you think also that at some point, and maybe even this season, they have to try to lessen Taylor's workload a little bit as far as his carries, even though, like you said, Hines will be out there and he'll get a lot of touches. At some point, may not be this year, but at some point, you got to kind of save him for the long haul.
If they're in position to, I think, but if they need him in order to win
That's
games,
different.
then
Yes.
I do think the whole situation this year is different though because uh, by the last quarter or half of the season, it seemed like they were trying to keep the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands as much as they could. And I just don't see that being the case with Matt Ryan. If Ryan needs to rip the ball 35, 40 times
They'll
a
allow
game,
him to do it.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be I just see them giving Matt Ryan as much of a leash as Andrew Luck and Philip Rivers had.
So you think last
They
year was maybe an anomaly? That's not the way we're
they
going to
had
work Taylor.
Well, Jonathan Taylor was in the middle of a special
That's true.
season.
Yes.
He had arguably the best season a Colts running back has ever had. So you want to keep doing that. And he was the difference between a lot of wins and losses. And they also had to run the ball because they couldn't rely on Carson Wentz. So the tone's just totally different. They're going to still want to feed Taylor because he's probably the best running back in the NFL. You just want to use that, obviously. But they don't have to be as reliant in 2022 as they were last year.
All right, now let's take a look at the other draft picks. The rest on defense. There were 4 players on defense, including 2 defensive backs. Nick Cross went in the 3rd round from Maryland, and Rodney Thomas from Yale with the last pick in the 7th round. Now Cross, you like the combination. He's physical, he's tough, he's fast. He ran a 4.34, so you like all of that. How does he fit in? Is he more they're gonna rely on him to be like that free safety guy with speed to kind of try to cover a lot of ground, that kind of deal? And I'm not sure where Rodney Thomas fits in. What was the deal with picking Thomas?
Yeah, so starting with Cross, they absolutely love him. They traded up to get him. They didn't have a 4th round pick, and they sent one of their 5th rounders from this year and a 3rd next year to come up and get him. So they love him. Their rationale there was if he was in next year's draft, where would you pick him? And unanimously, everyone in the draft room said 2nd round. So they had no problem getting rid of a 3rd rounder from next year. They were very surprised that he was still there. In this defense with Gus Bradley with more cover 3 stuff, he'd probably be the deep guy more often. His style of play, he's not afraid to come downhill and lay a hit. But you want to rely on that range and athleticism in the back end more. And they have guys like Kari Willis can come up and play in the box more. But no, long-term, Cross is honestly probably Kari Willis's replacement. But could also be for Julian Blackmon. Unfortunately, I think Blackmon has star ability, but he has had 2 significant injuries in the last couple years. He came into the league recovering from an ACL, and then I think it was week 6 suffered an Achilles last year. So he's been throwing some curveballs. But Cross could play either. I think he fits best as more of the free safety type. But they think he can do everything. They think he has abilities in coverage against the run. He can line up in the slot if need be. There was potential for him to play some corner, but I think they see him as a safety. So no, they really really like
Okay.
Cross, and I don't think any one of them would have been mad to take him in the second round. They just happened to be lucky and get him there at the end of the third.
All right. And then what was the logic on going with this kid from Yale?
Oh, Thomas. Basically, kind of the same story with just raw upside, has traits you want to work with. Another guy that switched positions. He was actually a linebacker at Yale in his first 3 years. And then they didn't play football because of COVID in 2020. So it delayed his switch to safety a year. So he played safety last year at Yale. And he's actually going to be a corner with the Colts.
Okay.
Because he's got good size. I think he's like 6'1", 195. Great athleticism. I guess he blew up their pro day at Yale. So he's just got the size and athletic traits they're looking for to play corner. It's probably going to be a practice squad guy if I had to guess, but they've got a deep group of corners right now, so it would be surprising to see him boot one of those guys off. Tony Brown is like their fifth guy who is a experienced NFL veteran. So he's probably a practice squad developmental guy, but I think they have high hopes for him eventually.
And they also drafted. They also signed the kid Weatherford from Miami of Ohio. And just taking a look here in the draft guide, he did have a sixth round grade. Started 3 years for Miami of Ohio. So you're looking at a guy that really had a good week at practice in the Senior Bowl and could have translated to a sixth round or seventh round draft pick. So that seemed like a pretty good signing as well.
Yeah, you look at Sterling Weatherford as well as JoJo Doman from Nebraska.
Doman. I can't believe he wasn't drafted.
Yeah, pretty similar guys. Linebacker, safety, hybrid types. Kind of big for safety, but kind of small for linebacker. But they have the safety athleticism. Those are two guys who I think could get on the roster. I just see them having really good special teams ability. And the Colts do like to get depth linebackers that have that special teams ability, and they'll get you on the roster if you're good enough for it. You could maybe see a situation where they could be used in sub packages, whatever Gus Bradley cooks up. There's always room for those guys that can, the tweeners that can play either or, and dime linebacker or whatever. So those are definitely two of the undrafted guys I've got my eye on.
Okay, and then to round out the drafted players, you got two interior defensive tackles. Eric Johnson at Missouri State, one of these FCS players who had a 4-year career, but you're looking at a guy with an 83-inch wingspan at 6'4", which is just amazing. And what the thing with Johnson is he played that one tech, I'm going to eat up space, let the linebackers make plays kind of guy in college because of the scheme they were running. But then he goes and ends up from I think it was the NFLPA game. Then he goes to the Senior Bowl because they were impressed with what they saw there. And they realized that, wait a second, this is a guy that actually is more than just that. He's got some pass rush to him. And that's the reason why he went from being just a college free agent signing to an actual draft pick.
Yeah, they initially, I think he's going to be in the rotation for nose or one tech with the Colts behind Grover Stewart. That's kind of probably his home position, but that pass rush ability, they did say they might get him some rotation at 3 tech as well. Just like you said, he's got the big size for the 1 tech, but the pass rush ability for 3 tech. So he's probably a little more of a projection at this moment. But they do like his versatility and his blend of athleticism and size. He's another one of those guys. Every one of the 8 guys they drafted had outstanding RAS scores. The blend of size and athleticism. He was one of them. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. I just don't know how much of an impact he'll have right away.
And then Brooks, another guy that you're looking at, first team AAC. led Cincinnati, one of the best teams in college football and one of the best defenses in the league last year in college football, and led them with 7.5 sacks from the interior of the defensive line. Added
Hmm.
56 tackles, so he had a really big breakout season last season. So another player that they added to the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, and Curtis Brooks is definitely my Colts late round sleeper. He's a guy that it was kind of pointed to his tweener size. You know, his size doesn't really scream
No,
one defined position. And I believe he's also like 24 years old. So between his age and size, I guess that just caused teams to pass up on him. But the Colts really like it. He's got a chip on his shoulder from being drafted that late. Another really athletic guy with decent enough size. With the Colts, that size won't matter. DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart are really the only guys on their defensive line that have super defined size. Like, you know what you're looking at with those guys. Everyone else can play just about everywhere on the line because they have good athleticism and size, and he fits that as well. Like you said, first team all conference, led the conference in tackles for loss, led the number 10 ranked defense in sacks. So really productive player. They like his attitude, and I could see him contributing earlier than Johnson. Johnson maybe has a little more upside, but I think Brooks could compete to be the third or fourth tackle right
all
away.
right, and then to wrap it up, there were two other players that the team signed that I just want to throw out there. And quarterback Jack Cohn. Now, he only started 1 year when he made the transfer from Wisconsin to Notre Dame, but you're talking about a pocket. I mean, the reason why he's not going to get drafted is because he doesn't have what most teams are looking for nowadays. He doesn't have the big deep arm, and he doesn't have any physical traits to run the football and add that dimension.
Yeah.
But he's a pocket passer, so he's good in the he's very accurate in the short to intermediate routes, and he has the makings of a long-term backup. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need
Mhm.
those guys on your team. And then the other guy that I thought I'd bring up would be Scott Patchin, the edge rusher from Colorado State. You're talking 6'6", 270. He played at Miami early on in his career, broke out last year, first team Mountain West Conference, led them with 18.5 tackles for loss and 10.5 sacks. Maybe I could see him as like a pass rush specialist down the road if he can make, if he kind of fit in the NFL. That would probably be where he fits.
Yeah, but when it comes to Cone, I think he's just kind of safe. The Colts do like to get some traitsy guys at quarterback sometimes, but with Cone, I think you throw him out there with Ellinger and James Morgan and the behind Matt Ryan in training camp, and you don't have to do so much work getting these guys right. Like, they'll get the ball where it needs to go. They'll dump it off to running backs. The offense can move a little bit. Like, you're probably gonna sacrifice some huge plays, but like, the offense can just move, and you don't have to alter the scripts very much. I could definitely see him being a practice squad guy. I don't know that he'll boot Sam Ellinger off as the backup at any point, but I could definitely see what they like in Cone. He's a smart guy, like you said. There's nothing spectacular about him, but he's just a guy, and sometimes that's
Sure.
necessary. And then Patchen, yeah, I could see it probably the big end spot for them. Probably not so much the Leo, but the big end spot. He's got that good size you could look for to maybe seal off the edge a little bit, but does bring the pass rush ability. So I think he fits into Bradley's scheme pretty well. They have, I think, one more spot open for a decent pass rusher,
Okay.
and if he looks good in camp, we'll see. But he's maybe a practice squad
There's
guy.
always going to be at least one rookie. I say this in every show that ends up signing and making the 53-man roster or whatever it is now, but making the final roster.
Yeah.
This could happen and more with the Colts because of the fact, even though they're a deep roster, the fact is there's just so much talent that they signed that I
Hmm.
could see multiple. I could see 2, 3 of these rookies make the team, make the final roster. It's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, they went 22 consecutive years with a rookie undrafted guy on the week 1 roster up until last
Oh.
year, and that's only because they signed 5 guys. But Deion Jackson like we talked about, got onto the roster mid-year
Okay.
and basically supplanted Marlon Mack. So there's always going to be at least one undrafted guy that does something for the Colts as a rookie.
All right. And when we talk to preview the season in July, August, who knows? Maybe we will have. Well, I know I'll have more information from you on who those players are that are standing out. But maybe we'll have a better idea of how many of them can actually make the final roster. So, Jake, again, is that the next thing you're working on? Is what were you saying that the one thing you were working on now that's going to come out soon?
Oh yeah, I'm just putting something together that's looking at some of the roster needs still for the Colts before the season begins. Luckily, they're not very big at all. So
No. As
yeah.
usual, they know what they're doing, and it's just a matter of putting it all together finally. So we'll talk more about that when we talk again, Jake. I appreciate your time as always. And again, we've got the draft guide to give away. So just let us know what you think about the wide receiver group for the Colts, and then we'll contact whoever that we are going to include in the opportunity to send out the guide as far as mailing address and so forth. So, Jake, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again just before the season starts.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg.